guys, my name is Brian, and I've had the PS5 Pro for about 5 days. Today's 11, so 4 days. You know, the thing about the PS5 is that you really have to understand where people are coming from when they're deciding whether or not this is something of an upgrade for them. You have a lot of games who weren't taking full utilization of the power, or it just wasn't pushing the system to the limit. So you heard a lot of people talking about that. It's also true that there are a lot of games that are pushing way beyond the PS5. So you look at Dogma, Dragon's Dogma 2, or even Jedi Survivor, right? Like, those games are being pushed to their limit. They don't look the best, right? Mainly because of some of the upscaling that they're using, like FSR and so on and so forth. It's not doing the best, but it's also not meeting a stable frame rate. Now, there are some people out there who have the 120 hertz and VRR and all that stuff. That's great. They can sort of compensate for those lacks in performance, but that doesn't mean that the PS5 is performing as well as it should, or that game developers are taking full advantage. They need more options. Enter the PS5 Pro. Now, I think there are really 3 reasons why you should or should not pick them up, and I think most people differ with, what tolerances they have for image fidelity and sharpness and shadow quality, stuff like that. Some of it is based on biology, right? Like, some of it is just based on how well our eyes see, whether we have glasses, contacts. Everyone sees and hears a little bit differently, so that is going to be just inherently subjective. But also, it's personal tolerances, like whether or not something like 1080p versus 1440p is something that you notice. Or do you look at the picture and the gameplay as one compelling product that you would want to buy? So those are the questions you have to ask yourself. I believe that most people are going to fall within the, hey, as long as it looks pretty great and it runs really well, I'm okay. Now, I think if you fall in that category, you're most likely going to be okay with the PS5. I don't think you're going to be missing out on some of the performance enhancements and, graphical increases in fidelity over something like the base PS5. But that isn't to say that it isn't noticeable. It is noticeable. And I sat down, so I had a little experiment. I sat down with my brother when I first got it and my wife. And we sat down, we watched The Last of Us Part 1, and we compared it on the PS5 Slim, which is what I currently own, and the new PS5 Pro. And I swapped back and forth. Now, to my eye, I can see a huge difference. It did look better. It was sharper, it was cleaner, it was more precise. It didn't have this weird hazing or noise around the beard and around the hair, around the grass, stuff like that. And I notice these things. These things bother me to a point where, like, my ADHD kicks in and I'm like, man, like, can you just get that out of my face? So I'm the kind of person that sees that, notices it, and really appreciates that it's gone and when it's gone. Now, my brother, that was even more interesting because he would notice, but also didn't think it was a big deal. He was like, yeah, it's sharper, it's cleaner, but like $700, like, that's a lot of money. So is that really worth it? And then my wife didn't even notice it at all. She didn't notice. She was like, in fact, like, I liked the contrast on the PS5 version versus the PS5 Pro. Now, that's pretty interesting because the edges were so much harder. They weren't as clean as they were on the PS5 Pro Enhanced update. Like, it kind of cleaned out the edges, and that's what I liked. It was very clean, thin, smooth, But she actually liked the contrast. It actually helped her, and so she preferred the PS5. So there's a lot of, personal tolerances and personal differences that might play into whether or not something is noticeable. But if you look at something like Jedi Survivor and you look at something like Dragon's Dogma, Spider-Man, Ratchet and Clank, The Last of Us, The Veil Guard, stuff like that. Now, these games often performed well, but with some of their graphical increases, to me, I was like, wow, I mean, the ray tracing on Spider-Man 2 looks absolutely amazing, running at 50, 55 frames a second, somewhere around there. I felt really good. The responsiveness was great. The fidelity was awesome. And I really noticed. My brother didn't notice at all. Like, he noticed in The Last of Us the difference between Pro Enhanced and regular, right? Just PS5. but he didn't notice nearly as much on Spider-Man, and that's where I noticed even more. I noticed the shadows, I noticed the buildings and the reflections from afar, from the cars to the puddles to even the shadows, just from the sun coming down in a long draw distance. Like, I can see all of that stuff, and some people just don't notice that. That's cool. Again, if you're one of those people who don't notice that, then I don't recommend the PS5 Pro. It's just going to be something that is going to be more difficult for you to really just justify that $700 price tag, I think the PS5 Pro is a really, really, really great device if you're the kind of person that notices this thing. And I just think that most people don't, and there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to dish out $700 so that you can feel, like, get rid of that FOMO, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense, especially if you're like a person who, one, doesn't care about those things, doesn't notice those things, or you don't have something that can take full advantage. If you're working off a monitor in 1440p, or you have a 1080p TV, or your TV only, works at 60 or 30 frames a second with gaming, it just, for a lot of people, doesn't make sense. For the people that it does, think about the kind of games that you've played, the kind of games that can and will take advantage. That being said, you should never buy a product based on what it can be. You should base it on what is right now. They say there's 50 to 80 games right now that take advantage of the Pro Enhanced update. The PS5 Pro also enhances or sharpens. It puts like a sharpen filter on PS4 games. That's kind of cool for someone like me who hasn't played a lot of PS4 games. But that's not the end of the world. I don't think that was the thing that was stopping me or enabling me to go play those games, go back and play those games. And you also have Game Boost, which is just, hey, this console is more powerful, which means the games that had a harder time on the PS5 are going to have a better time in the PS5 Pro. You really want to look for Pro Enhanced, where you're going to see graphics increase, where the PlayStation is going to use the new feature PSSR, which is artificial intelligence upscaling, an image from like 1080p to 4K or whatever the case may be, and just make it look that much better, look that much cleaner, and give up some of that performance that would otherwise go to it, right, from the graphics card to PSSR, and kind of balance that out. Yeah, I think altogether, when I look at Digital Foundry, I've seen about 15, 20 reviews across Digital Foundry and YouTube as a whole, comparing PS5 Pro Enhanced games. Each person should decide whether or not, based on 1, personal tolerance, 2, biology, whether you even notice things like that, and 3, whether you care. Like that, I think that's a big deal. Don't feel FOMO. I think this is the kind of product that, for someone like me, makes sense, but for most people, I would say kind of is on the bleeding edge of whether you should tolerate that. I think there are some people out there that have the extra income, they have the TV, maybe they don't notice but want the best of the best. Some people are going to want to trade in their device and say, hey, look, I have a PS5 or a PS4, or a PS5 and a PS4, want to trade them in, get a PS5 Pro Enhanced, or maybe they never bought a PS5 in the first place, or they have an Xbox Series X and they were waiting for the next generation version of PlayStation's console, and now here we are. Maybe you're burned by Xbox in some of their games right now. They're not having the best track record with their games, so you're like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to move on. I'm just going to get a PS5. Oh, PS5 Pro? Let's go do that instead. Yeah, so that's pretty much my first impressions of the PS5 Pro. It's a great device. It's a great product. A couple of notable things. One, it's roughly the size of the original PS5, so still really big, especially if you compare it to the Slim. It takes much more space. It gets a lot hotter than the PS5 Slim, which is what I currently have. Never heard it really turn up the fans. It comes with 2 terabytes of storage, right? So that's really, really awesome. The build quality is really, really great. Anyway, so that's my first impressions of the PS5 Pro. If you want to be a part of what's going on here, subscribe, leave a comment below, hit that like button, share with your friends, do all that stuff, and we can get more content out there for you guys. Anyway, my name is Brian. I'll see you right here next time. Peace.